Shalom, shalom, everyone, and welcome to the September edition of Rabbi in the Hot Seat. In just a few minutes, we're going to be joined by Rabbi MZ Dubov, who's going to be taking the hot seat this month and answering all of your questions. But before we jump into that, I would like to take a moment to share with you guys a little bit about a brand new segment, Rabbi in the Hot Seat, and also to find out where you guys are joining us from. So first of all, I'm Raquel, and I'm joining you from Jerusalem today. And I'd love to know where all of you are watching from today. So if you guys can just put that into the chat, just your name and where you're watching us from, and I will go ahead and shout some of those out. So before, like I said, we welcome our guest, Rabbi, for tonight, I want to tell you a little bit about the segment. So Rabbi in the Hot Seat is a brand new segment that we launched last month, where every month we invite a new rabbi to take the hot seat. It's a half-an-hour segment where we where the rabbi attempts to answer all of your questions live. So there's no going back. Whatever you want to ask, this is it. This is your chance. So we're going to welcome the rabbi in just a minute. And then a little bit later, we're going to go ahead and take your questions live. So be sure to put your questions in the chat. So without further ado, let's go ahead and welcome our rabbi for the segment. Shalom, shalom, Rabbi MZ Dubov. Thanks for joining us.
Shalom, 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 Raquel. Nice to be here with you.
Where are you joining us from?
So right now I'm in Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel. I'm actually at a friend's house for a little shindig in Ramat Beit Shemesh, but I live in Jerusalem, in French Hill, Jerusalem.
Oh, you also live in Jerusalem. I didn't know that, because I do, and most of our team doesn't.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
I live here, exactly, yeah.
Okay, cool. So before we go ahead and put you into the hot seat and get to the hot questions, let's find out, first of all, who are you? Who is Rabbi MZ Dubov? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I, just like every other person in this world, I'm a neshama, a soul, truly and deeply. But in this lifetime, so I was born in a place called Minsk, Belarus. And my family emigrated to the United States of America just before the fall of the Soviet Union. And I grew up in New York City, Brooklyn, New York, just a public school kid, really detached from my Judaism. No Jewish education, nothing like that. I knew I was Jewish. I wore a Magen David, very proud Jew. But really ignorant, by no fault of my own or my parents, to our tradition and the depth of the Torah and our education. But slowly over time, especially in college, when I went to Boston College and then later on through a birthright trip, my eyes were open to the beauty of the land of Israel and our Torah tradition. And later on, as I was representing Israel on my campus against the first wave, the original wave of anti-Israel sentiments, anti-Zionism on my campus, where I first initially encountered my own anti-Semitism, really. That's when I started doing all kinds of programming for pro-Israeli advocacy. And there, an Aish rabbi, a student of Rabbi Noach Weinberg of blessed memory, teamed up with us on campus. We did some incredible programming, cultural events, diplomatic events, and I made a friendship with him slowly over time that culminated in a trip to Israel. And that time, that trip was not just to party and enjoy and see some family, but to learn. And once you start learning, once you pop, the fun don't stop. And I found that you can't beat them, join them, as the saying says. And slowly, over the last 14 years, I've been developing myself here in Israel, in Jerusalem, learning Torah. And now I get to, for the last 7 years, teach the Torah. So I'm very excited to do this. I've never done anything like this before live. My students put me in the hot seat all the time. I'm always in the hot seat, but never in this forum. So I'm excited what you got.
I am too. Let's see how it goes. I just learned something. I didn't know that you actually met Rav Weinberg. I didn't know that.
No, I didn't meet him. I met one of his students, one of his many students all over the world. He was kind of like a Lubavitcher Rebbe, except for the Lubavitcher Rebbe was for the world of Chassidut, who started Chabad, and that's the Hasidic movement. So Rabbi Noach Weinberg was from the Litvish, the Lithuanian Jewry perspective, the same type of lover of Torah, lover of the Jewish people, who taught Torah and then empowered his students to go out there and that their students should also teach others. So my rabbi was Rabbi Hanano Wiener, who was in Boston. And when I was at BC, he was speaking to all the Jews all over Boston, trying to teach them and mostly host them for his epic Shabbat meal, his epic Shabbat table, which is unforgettable.
Amazing. So wait a minute, do you speak Russian then?
Да, конечно. Yeah, sure.
Wow. Okay. I thought so because of the last name, but you never know.
You never know.
Okay.
It's okay.
Okay, so let's go ahead and start with some warm-up questions. And again, for everyone watching us, whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, please go ahead and put in the chat where you're watching us from and your name. And also if you have any questions for Rabbi Dubov, and we'll get to those a little bit later. So to try to warm you up to the hot seat, these are some questions that we ask all of the rabbis. So let's see your take on it. If you could meet anyone from Jewish history, living or dead, who would it be and why?
So difficult to choose from our rich history. For sentimental purposes, I would just obviously meet one of my own ancestors who, before the communist revolution, were still living a Torah lifestyle, and I would speak to them about what that was like back then. But if I had to choose one person, one public persona, I think it would be my personal favorite sage of ours to learn Torah from. Not in person, obviously, but in his writings, and that would be, his name is Bechaye ben Asher. Bechaye ben Asher was a great sage. He lived in Spain in the 13th century, early 14th century, and he was a futurist. He did something incredible, which is he was able to mesh the world of high Kabbalah, high mysticism, and the world of rational, almost scientific philosophy of his day, and his commentary on the 5 books of Moses on the Torah is something that personally, for me, if you could find me on Friday nights, after the Shabbat meal when all my guests leave, right, and I tuck the kids in, I spend some time with my wife, that's what I'm doing until the wee hours of the night, until my eyes close, is learning the commentary of Rabbeinu Bechaye. So that's one person I would love to meet and pick his mind.
That's so interesting. So interesting. Everyone says something different. So that's why through this segment, I actually learned about a lot of people that I've never heard of because everyone says something different. So interesting. Okay. So that leads me, so that's how you spend some of your time. So that kind of leads me to my next question. When you're not being a rabbi, what do you do? What are the activities that you like? Anything normal?
Anything normal? Yeah, well, it's funny because for most of our history, being a rabbi, totally normal. In my family, totally weird, but it's okay. We already have a doctor, we have a lawyer, we have a, entrepreneur, this and that. Every Jewish family needs a rabbi. So I think it's normal. Everything I do is as a rabbi. It's funny, as much as I don't try to escape it, but when I'm, for instance, playing basketball, I like to spend my time playing basketball, especially on a nice, beautiful, sunny day, after Shabbat. The dads in the community over here in Friendship, we get together in an indoor, gymnasium, and we like to shoot some hoops and play some pickup. So even on the courts there, they call me Rabbi. Rabbi, look out, pass, Rabbi. Oh, the Rabbi fell. The Rabbi's going to the line. It's like, I said, guys, MZ, Misha, Mike, it's okay. No, the Rabbi. So I like to shoot some hoops, but I'm always the Rabbi,
I see. Okay, cool. Shoot some hoops. Okay, and then I guess that kind of leads me to my next question, which is, what is the most surprising thing people assume about you? Either as a rabbi or just as yourself. What do people assume about you?
When they're rude enough to actually say what they're thinking, you mean? I don't know what people assume about me. One thing that is articulated often, my last name Dubov sounds Bukharian. It sounds like the Jews from Bukhara, from Uzbekistan. Yep. People automatically assume that I'm Sephardi, which I'm always complimented by. Thank you for assuming I'm Sephardi. I really appreciate that. Maybe my tan is good that day. Maybe my shoes are styling, whatever. But I'm not Bukharian. As far as I know, Minsk for many, many generations. It's super Ashkenazi. What do people assume about me? I don't know that I drive a minivan. I mean, that's what I thought about every rabbi back when I was growing up, that I got 20 kids and I barely remember their names. There's tons of stereotypes and weird things that people assume about you, because you got to get to know
what's the weirdest thing someone's ever asked you?
Okay, I'll tell you what. The weirdest thing, this is really funny. Once, you'll be the judge of that, I guess, but I was once teaching a seminar to a group of students, and the rabbi of their group that brought them over there to Israel came over to me before I began the lecture, and he said to me, your last name is Dubov, right? I said, yeah. He said, wow, so you go back to Belarus? And I'm like, yeah. He takes my hand. He's about to kiss it. He thinks that I am related to, and I might as well be, but not to my knowledge, to a great Rabbi Dubov, who was a Chabad rabbi, who taught Torah to many, many thousands of Jews all across Europe. And he asked me, are you Chabad? And I said, no. And I kid you not, he like, with disgust threw that hand away. When I was going to be, he was almost kissing my hand. And then afterwards he said no. So that was the most brutal thing that was assumed about me. I'm kind of glad he didn't kiss my hand at the end of that encounter. But yeah, that's that. I'm not Chabad.
Have you ever looked into it? Do you know if you're related to this famous rabbi?
Yeah, so I have looked into it. Interestingly enough, it's a whole story, not for right now. But part of my father's lineage, stayed Torah observant even after the communist revolution, when it was forbidden to observe Torah and mitzvot and learn Torah, and they got sent to Siberia, unfortunately. So I recently reconnected with a long lost uncle of mine who lives in Haifa. He should be well, and all the Jews in Haifa and up north and all of Israel and all the world should be well right now, as we are in a war within a war. Some might say within a war right now. So God willing, he's healthy and his family as well. But he says that he remembers being on his father's lap in Siberia, his grandfather's lap in Siberia, learning Torah, and his side of the family was much more connected than mine. But what little fragments I could piece together from conversations with him, that's really all I got. So not that I know of.
I see. Okay, good enough. Okay, let me go over to the comments. For some reason, all of the comments are not loading. So what I see is Lynette from South Africa is watching. So thank you for that. I can't believe we're being viewed in South Africa. I see Donnie from New York. I see Jane from Florida. And that's all that I can see, but I know we're streaming on 2 platforms, so it might just be that I can't see the rest. I'll go ahead and look in a little bit. But without further ado, I think it's time to throw you into the hot seat.
All
so
right,
I'm going to start with some questions that were submitted by our audience, our Aish Plus community. Aish Plus is a new platform by Aish, for anyone that hasn't come across it yet, that was launched earlier this year. And it's a community where you can do everything from, hang out with each other, take classes, watch live segments like we're doing right now, ask your questions to the rabbis. You can do any and everything. So we asked people to ask us questions for this segment, and this is what they submitted. So the first question is, does prayer really improve my connection to God?
Yeah, great question. Great question, and I'll answer the question. The short answer is yes. All right. One thing you have to realize is that every single person inherently is connected to God. By definition of you existing, and our understanding is, and this could be demonstrated with rational evidence once someone decides to investigate it deeply through philosophy and cosmology and neuroscience and biology and mathematics and every which way you can approach it. Yes, the answer is you are right now being strobed into existence by God and infinite consciousness. So you're connected to God. God is thinking about you right now. He's willing you into existence. He's giving you the free gift of life. When we do this thing that they call prayer, which really is an inaccurate translation of the word tefillah, right? And when we introspect and when we dig deep within ourselves, past all the superficial layers of our identity as a social construct, even as a physical body, and we go into our higher level consciousness, in that place, and from that place, we can connect in a much more real way, past the virtual reality of space-time into the ultimate reality of God's infinite consciousness. It definitely does help us connect. I want to actually, it does if you do it right? If prayer to you means, begging like this for something that you really want, something new and shiny, I don't think that improves your connection with God. I think that ultimately makes you feel lacking, focus on what you don't have rather than what you do have. And again, mostly on the physical world, even if it's something like health and wealth and even success in your endeavors, right? But if you pray in a way that is real, as the Torah tells us, which is first by praising God, not that God needs your praises. His self-esteem is just fine. The world was created for us, not for him. I know if you read the prayer book, it sounds like he has a really low self-esteem and it needs me to tell him how great and amazing and all the synonyms for those words he is. But that's really just for us to kind of tune in to the highest level of reality. And by praising God, we can more clearly understand what it is we're a part of and how powerful he is, that he could do anything that he wants and that we want, perhaps, if it's aligned with his will. And what a privilege it is by such a powerful entity to be created and cared for. And then it's the asking, because asking is a statement of our understanding that God can do anything in this world. And then last but not least, and this is the most important part of prayer, is gratitude. If you show gratitude to God for what he has already given you, then for sure, even without all the other highfalutin, consciousness stuff that I talked about previously, if you just show some gratitude for what you already have, you will surely connect to God. Because if you attribute it to the unified source of all of reality, everything good in your life, and everyone that you love that does goodness for you is ultimately also a creation of God, then that should definitely cause you to connect to God and to love God more, and to want others as well to be more grateful and more connected to our Creator.
So what you're saying is the prayer really is for us, ultimately.
100%. It's interesting because you'll find a lot of statements in our sages and in the Torah that seems to contradict that, but you have to learn them as a whole picture. So you'll find things like God sometimes sends people situations in life because he desires the prayers of the righteous. This is a statement from our sages, from the Talmud. And you see in other situations where people are clearly put into tough spots, in order that they should call out to God so that he can come and save them afterwards, right? So it seems like God needs some recognition or something at that moment. He desires the prayers, like what's that all about? But the answer ultimately is that it's all for us, it's not for him. And sometimes we're just the walking dead. We're just sleeping through life, and God wakes us up sometimes as to what's most important in life and where all this is coming from. But it's ultimately for us to live afterwards attuned to and in tune with what the most important thing in life is, which is ultimately our soul, our relationship with others as souls, and relationship with the source of all souls, God.
Wow, interesting, very interesting. So in the interest of time, I'm going to jump over to the next question, which is, I actually want to hear the answer to this one because I was surprised by this, and that is, can God read your mind?
Sorry, I was just telepathically trying to tell our audience the answer to that question. That didn't work. I'm just joking. But the point is like this. First of all, if you believe that there are people that can read minds, then surely God can read minds, right? That's just like a silly way of saying that everything in this world that we have in the physical world is a mirror for the spiritual world. So our sages tell us that there's an eye that sees, an ear that hears, right? And a hand is recording everything that we do, right? Say and think, by the way. So that's the answer to your question, is yes, obviously. But our sages famously said at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, when technology was all of a sudden exponentially, right, advancing, and eventually you finally got to, things like first the telegraph and the telephone, right? The rabbi said, this is amazing. I can whisper over here in Europe, and a Jew in America can hear me loud and clear, right? As is happening right now. He said, this is what the Mishnah means when the Mishnah, the oral tradition, tells us that God has an ear that hears. If human beings can recreate an ear, right, and this system of communication across the ocean, right, almost instantaneously, right, almost, then surely God, the all-powerful one, can hear everything that we're not only saying, but thinking. An eye that sees. Cameras first came out, and boom, it's like, you're never alone, right? Especially if you live in a civilized a country and big cities, especially, you're almost always on CCTV. And the answer is that yes, God is an infinite consciousness that is willing into existence all subsequent finite levels of reality. That includes the physical world. That includes the world of wisdom and abstract thought and music and beauty, aesthetics, right? Philosophy and mathematics. But that also includes our thoughts, right? Our thoughts are very ephemeral. They're not physical per se. I mean, they're represented by these physical, synapses firing, electronic signals of some sort. But it's very hard to understand, at least for me, not only for me, but also for neuroscientists themselves, how it's possible that these little electronic symbols actually cause our conscious experience. It's clear that they correlate to our conscious experience, but to cause our conscious experience, no one's really been able to explain causality when it comes to the physical structure called our nervous system and our brain and our conscious experience of the world. And God is the creator of that conscious experience. And so if God creates the very ability to have a conscious experience, then surely the author has everything within it revealed to him at every moment, for sure. Yes.
So that's both amazing, but also scary, because it's like everything you're doing, God kind of already knows. So then,
Okay.
so then,
It sounds like you're alluding to the free will conundrum, which we can talk about. I don't know if that's on the menu, but you know, if
well,
I've been on,
someone asked that question. Someone asked, if everything is predestined, do you truly have free will, like to shape your own life and your own destiny?
okay, that's funny.
That's like you're reading minds right now. I don't know.
Yeah, so I was about to say, if you believe people can do that, then for sure God can. I'm not reading your mind, but it's always a question that's asked. It's a classical question that's had, you know, much ink spilled, many seas and oceans and rivers of ink over time spilled on answering that question. One thing I can tell you, just going back to you lamenting that it's scary that God can read your mind, I want to just put you at ease a little bit, and that is as follows. You know, there's this thing that it's called intrusive thoughts, when people just have a really scary, out of the blue, dark, usually thoughts that so much don't represent them, but it's like a visceral reaction to things or inspired by some creative, you know, episode they saw or whatever the case is. So it's very important to understand that you are not your thoughts, right? And that's very important to understand when you're meditating as well, is that you are not your thoughts. The Eastern masters will tell you that when you get into a place of meditation, you're really able to zone, you know, everything out and just be with everything in real time, mindful of everything as it is. You start to see your stream of consciousness, your thoughts in front of you, as though you're sitting at a riverbank, and the thoughts are just kind of floating by, right? And that's a very high level, because, you know, it means that you recognize there's a me intrinsically, a super high, lofty consciousness, right? A soul. And then there's my thoughts, which are already part of this very much finite existence that I'm living right now in this iteration. And the highest level of meditation, as far as I know, is not having no thoughts at all. I don't even know if that's actually possible, but it's being able to choose which thoughts to pick out of the water and to play with and to examine, right? And to bite into and to smell, right? And which thoughts to just continue to let pass by, right? So when you realize that you are not your thoughts, then any kind of intrusive thoughts or gut, you know, reactions, if you don't want to take ownership for those because they don't morally represent you, or they're not your personality truly, then those are not you. So God, even though he sees those thoughts, he's not you. Those thoughts are not you, and therefore he's not attributing them to you necessarily. The question is, what do you do with your thoughts? And that's where we get into free will. Can you actually choose what you do with those thoughts, right?
Or in this case, the question is, everything predestined? Like, is there such thing as free will? If God knows everything and created everything, then where's the free will?
Okay, good question. So you said it very nicely. You said, if God knows everything already in the future, what you will do, then where is your free will right now in order to do it, right? And that question assumes that you already have free will. The question is, like, how does that work with God's omnipotence, with God's omniscience, right? There's a deeper question, which we're not going to go into right now, which I can, maybe you can post. I recently did a podcast with a student of ours who came to Aish, learned that the Foundations program is now actually at Aish LA, one of our many branches around the world. And he has a podcast where he invited me to be a guest, and I spoke for an hour, okay, on what would have been only a half-hour slot, all about the conundrum of free will, how it's possible that we have free will in the first place, right? And that question essentially is if one assumes that there's nothing more to this world than just physical stuff, particles and whatnot, then particles are not conscious. So how is it possible that we, just a collection of particles, should have free will, right? If you just look at us as physical beings, we shouldn't. And the other question is if God is making everything happen, is an infinite consciousness willing this world into existence, then how can my finite consciousness have a will of its own, right? Exactly. And so that I delve into in depth there. However, like you had said, Raquel, assuming that we do have free will, does God's foreknowledge kind of mess with that free will? And the answer in brief is like this. If there's a possibility to do something, think something, or say something, if we can imagine a possibility at any given moment, then the fact that we can imagine it means it exists somehow, somewhere in the world of potential, in the world of potentiality. Anything that exists in the world of potential exists. If God is the highest infinite level of independent existence, that is ultimately the source for all subsequent lower levels of reality and existence, and the world of potential is a world of existence, it does exist, then God, this is very important, from his perspective, whatever that means, from the perspective of the creator, everything that could have possibly ever happened did happen from God's perspective. Then that's a mind-boggling thing to understand.
Yeah,
that means everything that we could have said just now, thought just now, done just now, in the last however 25, 26 minutes that we've been live, and everything that could have ever happened since the world went bang, if you subscribe to Big Bang cosmology, and even before that in the quantum fluctuations in the potential vector field, from the beginning of infinite, of finite time and space, in the, so to speak, infinite possibilities, from God's perspective, all of those combinations, diversions, possibilities, from his perspective, they happened. From our perspective, we will live only one of those permutations. We will live only one of those combinations. We live only one life. YOLO, as far as we know, in this iteration. We do believe in reincarnation, not a conversation right now. Reincarnation is a thing from Judaism. But right now, you and I, at every moment, once we pass a certain moment in time, we're not going back. So this is the life that we chose, right? So from our perspective, there is free will. And from his perspective, there is the thing that we actually chose. But in reality, from his perspective, we equally chose in potential all possible lives. It's just that at the end of our life, when we look at our life backwards, when we do a life review, a very common idea in many monotheistic religions, maybe other religions as well, and definitely is the product of a soul. And certainly when you look at reincarnation, when you look back at your life, you will have only lived one of those permutations, one of those combinations. And at every single moment that you were conscious of right and wrong, there's a right thing to do, there's a right thing to say, there's a right thing to think at any given moment, and you could choose that, then that moment of free will is yours forever. And in reality, it's those moments of free will that are the true you. You are the sum total of every free will decision you'll ever make. And the fact that you could have been trillions and Googles and infinite other people, so to speak, doesn't change the fact that you are, at the end of your life, who you created yourself to be as a partner with God. But from his perspective, it all happened.
So then it's also a question of time, right? Because time is very different for us than it is, for God or out of this life, right? So time for us is happening on a different scale, and for God, that already happened. So even though you chose it, that he already knew it because it already happened, but you still chose it. Is that am I understanding it?
Well, time doesn't apply to God, and this is very important. We're getting into kind of Marvel Universe, multiverse type of language here. So I'm going to be brief because it's going to put everyone else to sleep, but the nerds will definitely get excited, right? So I'm a nerd, by the way, as you can probably tell. Right? Okay. So the point is as follows. The point is that time is a measure of change. Okay, that's how NASA defines time, a measure of change in matter and energy. So that's why time is subjective, right? But time is a measure of change. And that's what the Rambam, Maimonides, said almost 1,000 years ago. From God's perspective, there is no such thing as change intrinsically. There's a verse in the prophets that says, Ani Hashem, Ani lo shaniti. I am God, I don't change, right? Why? Because the infinite was all-encompassing oneness, no parts, no flux, no here to differentiate from there, and no now to differentiate from later. And so for God, it's not that everything already happened, it's that everything all at once is happening always and in a way that we can't possibly fathom. But like I said, your soul is taking one journey through this world, and you in real time are responsible. To super simplify it, if you saw CCTV, as we spoke of earlier, of yourself throughout the day in a certain situation, the fact that someone later on watches the tape of that and knows exactly what you're going to do and how you're going to do it doesn't change the fact that in that moment, right, you had the choice to do said activity. It's just that from God's perspective, there's infinite versions of that tape, but your life is that one. And those all fade away. Once you choose yours, they fade away. They're irrelevant now to the conversation. All you know is what you know.
Wow. Okay. That was a lot, but it makes sense. It makes sense. I'm going to jump over for a second and see who else is watching us. So we have Ronald. Thank you for watching. We have Carmen. We have Tikos, who's apparently watching us from Budapest, Hungary. I don't know what's going on today. Like,
you say Cartman is watching us? Cartman?
Carmen.
Oh, Carmen. I actually felt truly honored. Cartman is watching us. That would have been awesome.
No, Carmen is watching.
I heard you.
Goes from Budapest is watching. So before I go to the final question, then we'll take questions. If anyone has questions for Rabbi Dubov, please put it in the chat now. I'm going to go to the final question submitted by our community, and then we'll quickly go through a round of if anyone has questions online. And that question is, you actually alluded to this. It's like you have telepathy for this segment. I don't know what to say. So it's, does Judaism believe in an afterlife? Is that a question for longer than we have time for?
I'll do it really quickly. Okay, from the Torah perspective, in Judaism, right, you are a soul. You happen to have a body. You are not your body, and your soul is not in your body. Your soul is tethered to your body, okay? Like internet doesn't exist in my phone, right? The internet exists, right? The hardware and software in my phone tether it, and then I'm able to manifest it, manipulate it, and enjoy it, right? So your soul, being that it's tethered to your body now, before your body existed untethered, is an untethered soul, and will exist once the hardware and software of our bodies, unfortunately, God willing, at 120, right, go offline, right? Then you're, so to speak, uploaded back to the cloud. And all of your choices, your free will choices to be exact, right? And all of your memories, right, live on as data, so to speak, as information, as your unique IP address, your soul. And absolutely, Judaism believes in an afterlife, not heaven and hell. That's a misnomer, right? There's a quality of experience in the next world as an untethered soul based on the ethical and moral quality of life that we lived in this world. Nothing to do with our status, our wealth, our looks, right? Although those may be means to a moral and ethical end. But yes, we absolutely do know that there is an afterlife for sure.
It's so interesting that you said, it's the first time I've ever heard anyone say that your soul is not in your body.
It's not in your body. That's one of the things that I alluded to earlier, where if you read classical sources without the education, all around, then it certainly says that the soul exists here, at the fontanelle, where we crown ourselves as men with the tefillin, right? And the soul exists in the heart, right, for everybody, and things like that. The soul is in the blood, a certain level of soul, the primal, life force that wants to procreate and eat and continue our species exists, so to speak, coursing through our veins. But these are all metaphors. These are all ways of speaking about ideas that existed in parallel planes of existence to our body.
What you just explained about the internet and the phone is so perfect, because the internet does exist everywhere, yet you can use your phone to, manipulate that and receive information and send information and upload information. That's a really good explanation. I never heard that before. I always thought my soul was in my body. It was going to leave my body when I was done. Okay. Very cool. Very cool. Thank you so much, Rabbi Dubov. Let me see if we have any questions. I think I'm having a problem seeing the questions because I don't see them, but I see people watching, which is strange.
Well, everyone can send us the questions. We can have the conversation later on. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, you can send in. You can always send us your questions. And if you're a member of the Aish Plus community, you can submit your questions at any time, and we will save them for the next Rabbi in the Hot Seat. So not to worry. So then in that case, I'm going to go ahead and let you go. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to everyone who's apparently watching all around the world. We will see you guys next month with another Rabbi in the Hot Seat. Thank you, Rabbi MZ Dubov. We'll see you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.